2024 Indonesia's latest horror film. Death is imminent, and the horror is coming. It has only been a few days since its release. It has already claimed the box office champion for local horror films. Its level of horror is comparable to banned films. Hurry and watch it with your gullible friends. The story starts with high energy. A woman, in order to support her 3 children, actually sought out a wizard, sold her soul to the devil. As the ritual concluded, her struggling snail noodle shop surprisingly experienced a revival in just a few days. Customers came and went in a steady stream. The woman also relied on the money she earned, successfully raised her 3 children. But what she never expected was everything she gained at the cost of her soul would, 10 years later, encounter a series of bizarre and strange events. First, it was the snail noodle shop. The original business was doing quite well, but recently, the store's business has been declining day by day. In the woman's eyes, everything in the store was as usual, but to outsiders, this store appeared dirty and chaotic. It was hard to come by customer. Unexpectedly, just as she brought the food back, it suddenly had a lot of bugs. It made the woman feel so nauseous she almost vomited. Seeing this situation, she couldn't help but feel puzzled. This was clearly freshly made food. How could it become so disgusting? So she hurried over to check the food. As a result, she discovered that this freshly cooked food was all permeated with an unbearable stench. One bizarre scene after another made the woman recall the sacrificial ceremony from 10 years ago. For this reason, she immediately sought out the shaman from back then. She intended to ask about the reason behind it, but when she arrived at the shaman's house in the middle of the night, but at the door, I saw a group of mourners. After asking around, I finally learned. It turned out that on that very afternoon, the wizard had suddenly died in a strange manner. No one knew how she had actually died. All that was known was that before she died, she was scratching her face like a madwoman, and let out several fits of hysterical screams. Then, the woman walked into the room to mourn the wizard. But just as she was grieving, she was horrified to discover that the cotton in the wizard's nose had inexplicably fallen out. The woman thought this was a post-mortem reflex, so she trembled as she tried to stuff the cotton back in. Little did she know that the next second, the wizard suddenly opened her mouth again, and her eyes were staring straight ahead. The woman was completely terrified by this scene. She quickly called for the funeral staff, but there was no response for a long time, so she could only muster her courage to close the wizard's eyes. Unexpectedly, the next second, the wizard suddenly came back to life. He spat out a mouthful of black blood at the woman. "Miss, what happened? What is this? Oh my God." Just as the woman was panicking, the youngest son at home also encountered something incredibly strange. At first, he was snacking while watching Ultraman, but as he watched, a sudden, urgent knocking sound rang out. He was just about to go over to open the door. The door opened by itself for no reason. The youngest son squinted to take a look. It turned out to be a woman with a hideous face. After putting on his glasses to take a closer look, it was actually his mother who had returned. But strangely, no matter how he spoke to his mother, she always ignored him. She walked into the room with a blank expression. The younger son couldn't help but feel a bit confused upon seeing this, so he followed his mother into the room. But just as he was looking around, she closed the door. The younger son was so scared that he quickly closed the door. Then he immediately knocked on his sister's door. He told her everything about the terrifying scene he had just experienced. "What's going on? Mom is back, but she seems strange. She isn't talking to me. What's so strange about that?" While the siblings were talking, the knocking sound came again. The younger son immediately hid behind his sister upon seeing this. But Xiao Mei didn't think much of it. She calmly walked over and opened the door, until their mother slowly walked into view, and kissed her. The younger son finally felt relieved, but upon thinking carefully, he felt that something was very off. If their mother had just returned home, who was that woman just now? Sure enough, it was late that night. While the mother was sound asleep, her body suddenly convulsed uncontrollably, and her eyes rolled back. After the woman suddenly woke up, she discovered that the radio beside her was playing the whispers of a demon. She got up in surprise to turn it off. Unexpectedly, the lights in the room went out instantly. Just as she was filled with terror, the wardrobe suddenly opened. A twisted, grotesque hand slowly crawled out from inside, staring at the horrifying scene before her. The woman was so scared she didn't dare to breathe. But right after that, her body once again underwent an uncontrollable transformation. She saw an evil force lift her up forcefully, and it tightly gripped her neck. Seeing this, the woman struggled desperately to break free. But the next second, fortunately, all of this is just a terrifying nightmare. However, the woman always feels that it is happening incredibly realistically. She suspects it might be the sacrifice ritual from 10 years ago that led to her current situation. This scene is truly spectacular. I really want to drive to the scene and take a look. Speaking of cars, I recently bought a BMW 3 Series from Guazi Used Cars. It only cost me over 90,000. That's over 100,000 cheaper than a new car. It drives just like new. New cars depreciate quickly now. Guazi is especially cost-effective. Every car from Guazi undergoes official professional inspection. You can test drive it for 3 days, so you can rest assured. If you have an old car, you can also sell it through Guazi. In short, trust me, Guazi is the way to go for buying and selling used cars. The next day, the woman found a sorcerer, and earnestly asked him to take a look at her. The sorcerer immediately asked for the woman's birth date and time. He then began to perform a ritual for her, and as the incantations were frequently recited, the woman also fainted, but it wasn't long before she suddenly woke up again. Her eyes instantly turned blood red. Hello, little friends. Who are you? If you don't want to die, don't interfere. Ha ha ha. Oh, the mage was immediately knocked to the ground. He spat out a mouthful of old blood, but just when he thought he was about to meet his end, the woman unexpectedly returned to her original form. Witnessing the scene before him, and recalling everything that had just happened, the mage immediately concluded that this was a warning from the demon. If he interfered again, he would surely die. At the same time, because of this, he realized that the ritual held for the woman 10 years ago had gone wrong, because the witch who performed the ritual for her had mysteriously died not long ago, and this meant that no one could provide sacrifices to the demon anymore. The demon had lost its sacrifices. Naturally, it will come out to cause chaos. That's why it targets women. You should expel it immediately. There's still time to do it now, but it's not easy. You need to go back and find the wizard who performed the ritual for you, or a relative of the wizard, or someone with greater abilities. For this reason, the woman immediately went to the wizard's residence. She wanted to find the wizard's relatives, but as soon as she walked in, she found that it had been abandoned for a long time. There was no one around. Just when the woman was at a loss, on a nearby mirror, a shadow suddenly appeared, and slowly approached her. The woman sensed something was wrong and turned to look. She was immediately terrified by the horrifying scene before her and screamed. After returning home, the woman seemed like a different person. Her body was covered in red sores. She also became incredibly weak. Even if she ate just a little bit, she would vomit a large amount of black blood. This scared Xiaomei. She quickly called her older brother, but there was no answer on the other end of the line. As time passed second by second, the woman's condition became increasingly serious. Even her usually lively and cheerful brother lay on the bed pale in that moment. No matter how Xiaomei called him, there was no response at all. Therefore, Xiaomei had to call her brother for help again. Fortunately, this time Wei finally answered the phone, and he rushed home immediately. But when they arrived at the room, they found that their mother and brother were already gone. Only strange sounds remained, echoing continuously in their ears. The few of them followed the sounds to the bathroom, and finally found their mother and brother. But at first glance, it scared them half to death. The brother's body was very hot, he needed a bath. Mom, brother, this is enough. Oh God, forgive us. After returning to the room, mother's consciousness finally returned. At the same time, she explained the whole story in detail to the siblings. But there was one thing that she had never mentioned. She told a few people about the ceremony from that year. There was also a very strange rule that once the ceremony began, someone had to provide a sacrifice for the demon, and if the demon lost its sacrifice, it would take the woman's child. So in the past few days, the brother encountered so many strange things. But now, the only wizard who could provide a sacrifice is dead. Even the wizard's family has fled. The only option left now is to find a master with profound magic to perform an exorcism for mother. Only then might it be possible to expel the demon. The three who heard this said, the next morning, they found a few believers. With their help, they went to the master's location. They first drove to a forest. Then they carried their mother deeper into the woods. As they approached the master's residence, they decided to pray to show their sincerity. Unexpectedly, shortly after the prayer began, their mother's body showed signs of distress again. The younger brother sensed something was wrong and looked back. To his surprise, he saw that terrifying demon circling around their mother, having long coveted her. Meanwhile, the others continued their prayers as usual, completely unaware that danger was approaching. It wasn't until a moment later that Xiaomei finally noticed something was wrong. Their mother, who had been lying on the ground lifeless, suddenly vanished in an instant. Seeing this scene, the group immediately split up to search. They didn't know how long it had been. Finally, I found my mother not far away, but when my mother turned around, she had already transformed into a demonic figure. Her pupils were pitch black, and her face was twisted in rage. She also had a mouthful of rotten, foul-smelling yellow teeth. The two had not yet reacted when she jumped straight onto one of them. With one blow, she sent him to hell. Looking at such a terrifying scene, the other believer trembled in fear. He stood there in a daze, not daring to make a sound. It was only when the demon slowly approached him that he remembered to run away. But the demon grabbed the believer and pulled him over, then struck him hard with a blow. A hysterical scream instantly echoed throughout the forest. Wei and another believer rushed over upon hearing the sound, but they only saw two bloody corpses. Just as the two were filled with sorrow, the demon quietly appeared behind the believer. By the time Wei reacted, there was another corpse on the ground. The demon had already vanished without a trace. It came before the brother and sister. Disguised as a woman, it knelt not far away. When Xiaomei noticed, she was naturally drawn over. Unexpectedly, at the moment the two approached, they had already fallen into the trap set by the demon. The two were desperately running ahead. The demon was crazily chasing behind. But just at that moment, the brother accidentally fell to the ground. Seeing this, the demon immediately grabbed his leg and pulled him back frantically. Xiao Mei hurriedly stepped forward to stop it. As a result, she was slapped by the demon and flew 2 miles away. Fortunately, at this critical moment, a Wei appeared just in time to stop the demon. The younger brother narrowly escaped the demon's clutches. But he is just an ordinary human. How could he possibly be a match for the demon? Not long after, a Wei was firmly grabbed by the demon by the neck. Although he struggled desperately to break free, it was ultimately futile. Fortunately, at the critical moment, a stick suddenly appeared, and it knocked the demon unconscious. The one who came to the rescue was the master they had been searching for. After the master examined the situation, the three finally understood that their mother's body had been completely possessed by the demon. If they had arrived just a moment later, the three of them would have been implicated as well. And now the only way is to use a handful of soil from the wizard's grave, along with a coconut containing the water of God, to completely expel the demon from their mother's body. For this reason, Awei decided to have the two stay behind to watch over their mother. He went to search for those two items himself. However, before he set off, the master handed him a bottle of holy water. This was to ensure he could protect himself in times of danger. Soon after, Awei arrived at the cemetery. He successfully found the wizard's grave, but just as he was about to scoop up the soil, he found that he couldn't lift it at all. Awei couldn't help but feel extremely surprised. He focused his gaze. To his shock, the ground was covered with disgusting worms. Seeing this, Awei was instantly filled with terror. But amidst his fear, he suddenly felt an unbearable headache. It felt as if something was pressing down on him. But for the sake of his mother, he still endured the pain. He exerted all his strength to dig out the soil. Unexpectedly, in the next moment, countless grotesque corpses appeared before him. They surrounded Awei. It seemed like they were about to devour him at any moment. Awei realized that the situation was not good. He quickly took out the holy water. He sprinkled it over the wizard's grave, and at the moment he sprinkled the holy water, the group of corpses around him also vanished. Afterwards, Awei hurriedly left the cemetery. He drove around, constantly searching for the coconut. But there were so many trees here, he didn't know how to look for it. For a moment, Awei was at a loss. Unexpectedly, at that moment, his mother's spirit suddenly appeared. She guided him to finally find the coconut. But unexpectedly, just as Awei found the coconut, the master suddenly encountered an accident. The demon seemed to sense the danger. It immediately began to struggle. Seeing this, the master quickly urged the siblings to step back. Then he began to chant a spell at the demon. But no matter how he chanted, none of it has any effect on the demon. Furthermore, the demon made a harsh statement. It warned the master not to meddle. You will die. God is great. The demon instantly became furious upon seeing this. It let out a strange, chilling laugh immediately. Then it twisted its body and approached the master. The master, seeing this situation, immediately swung the long staff in his hand. However, it was easily blocked by the demon. Seeing how strong the demon was, the master no longer hid his strength. He directly took out the ancestral demon-slaying sword. He engaged in battle with the demon once again. But despite that, the demon countered with a swift move, nearly causing him to lose his second brother. Meanwhile, during their fight, the demon even directly mounted the master, and brutally tore the flesh from his arm. The master exerted all his strength, finally managed to shake off the demon. Seeing that the demon had fallen silent, the master cautiously approached to check. But in the next second, the demon suddenly opened its eyes. It leapt into the air and pinned the master down. The master, seeing this, picked up his sword again. Unexpectedly, the opponent was not afraid at all. It even directly grabbed it, and pierced through his body. The horrifying scene before them also left the siblings beside them, unable to help but feel terrified. They were so scared that they hurriedly turned to go back to their room. But the door wouldn't open no matter what. With no way out, Xiao Mei could only hold her brother and wait for death, and the brother could only helplessly call for their mother. Unexpectedly, it was this call for Mom that awakened the last trace of consciousness within their mother. But not long after, the demon once again took over their mother's body. It quickly grabbed the sword. It swung fiercely at the siblings. Fortunately, at the moment of crisis, Awei arrived just in time to prevent it from attacking his family. Just as the two sides were entangled, the heavily injured master finally took this opportunity to open the coconut. In order to eliminate the demon, he began to chant the incantation, while pouring the coconut water onto his hands. After doing all this, he suddenly splashed the coconut water at the demon. The demon let out a heart-wrenching scream as it was hit. Its body began to convulse uncontrollably. Seeing this, the master immediately pressed the attack. He splashed coconut water on it again. This finally forced the demon out of the woman's body. After this incident, the family finally returned to peace. The demon did not harass the four of them again, but their mother was ultimately gravely injured by being tormented by demons, and unfortunately passed away. Fortunately, before their mother died, she entrusted the small shop to Awei and Xiao Mei, so the three brothers were able to survive. But the matter did not seem to end there. Alright, that's it for today's story. Subscribe to the channel to continue watching. See you next time.